Boogity, boogity, boogity! Let's go racing, boys!
It's now time for your weekly pit stop for all things racing, as we bring you full insight on the happenings in NASCAR, the latest results.
Austin Dillon wins the 60th running of the Great American Race.
And the hottest news.
We're here today to confirm the news you received this morning that I've decided to make this season my last as a NASCAR Cup driver.
So buckle up as we get ready to drop the green flag on the No Caution podcast. Now, your crew chiefs of the show, Trevor Mater and Jacob Blair. You are listening to the No Caution podcast. Trevor Mater, Jacob Blair here with you to bring you all things in the world of racing. NASCAR, Indycar, whatever it is you want to hear about, we're willing to talk about it because we know about it, or at least we're going to act like we know about it, right, Jacob?
Oh, yeah.
So let's just jump right into it. This past week, they were at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, NASCAR was, and unfortunately, there's not a ton of stuff to talk about from it. It was kind of an uneventful weekend in racing in Vegas.
Yeah, there really wasn't a whole lot of drama. Maybe the only real big problem was when Kurt Busch decided he wanted to take out Chase Elliott on accident, lost his car, and other than that, it was just a very straightforward race. We've talked about it for several weeks. The Fords have been really, really strong. Again, they're strong again at Las Vegas, and Kevin Harvick, 2 weeks in a row, dominates the NASCAR Monster Energy Cup Series and wins at Las Vegas. And that's really all there is to say, is he just dominated that race and brought home another victory, giving himself some more playoff points, and really, I think, making everyone else a little bit scared moving forward the rest of the season.
Let's just go ahead and jump into the Cup race, because like you said, this is the one there's the least to talk about. Kevin Harvick right now, through the first 3 races, and I know it's only 3 races, looks about as dominant as I think I've seen anybody look in the first 3 races since maybe when Jimmy Johnson was at his peak in like 2006, 2007, when he would run okay at Daytona, then he would go and dominate at Fontana and dominate at Las Vegas. That's probably the last time I've seen someone run that good this early in the season.
Yeah, and it also goes back to the Fords as well. The Fords this week got 6 of the top 10, and they just seem to have that mile-and-a-half program down. Now that we get to go to a mile track, a little bit of a slower racetrack, not necessarily a short track, because ISM, also known as what should be called Phoenix. The track, it acts a little bit like a short track, but the speeds are still pretty high there, so we'll see really what happens there, if the Fords still have an advantage or if everyone catches back up. But just looking at the top 10 from Las Vegas, Ford first with Kevin Harvick, and then Ryan Blaney, Brad Keselowski, and Joey Logano, all 3 Penske cars, 5th through 7th, and then Paul Menard 9th, and Eric Almirola 10th. Those are 6 of the top 10 all being Fords.
And I've said for a while now that Stewart Haas moving to Ford was a really, really big thing for that Ford program, because really outside of that, they had the 2 Penske cars up until this year. Richard Petty Motorsports wasn't doing a lot. They're now switched to Chevrolet. Roush Fenway is not. They've upped their restrictor plate game, and I think they're getting more consistent. But man, there was like a 2 or 3 year stretch there with Bain and Stenhouse and Greg Biffle towards the end of his tenure there that, they were popping out 15 place cars if they were lucky, and they were just really struggling. And who would have thought, if you would have told me in 2016 that Fords would dominate the early part of the season in 2018, I wouldn't have believed it.
I don't think a whole lot of people would. And just to talk about how dominant Kevin Harvick was, he led 214 of the 267 laps. And we saw this a little bit last week, but there were only 9 cars finished this race on the lead lap. And this is with these fabricated stage cautions. This was not a race that went
green, white,
checkered or anything like that. There were cautions throughout this race, and he still lapped up to 9th place. That's just how dominant Kevin Harvick was.
Yeah, quick rundown of your top 10 last week from the Pennzoil 400 presented by Jiffy Lube. Kevin Harvick picked up the win as 2nd in a row. Kyle Busch 2nd. Kyle Larson 3rd. Martin Truex Jr. 4th. Ryan Blaney 5th. Brad Keselowski 6th. Joey Logano 7th. Eric Jones 8th. Paul Menard and Eric Almirola rounded out your top 10. And when I look at this top 10, Jacob, and I kind of look at the beginning of the season, there's been some guys that have kind of had some really bad luck and have struggled, in particular 2 Hendrick guys. Yeah,
the whole Hendrick team itself is really underperforming this year, but Chase Elliott's had a really tough start to the season. Crashes out at Daytona, crashes out at Las Vegas, doesn't necessarily run too strong in Atlanta. But then the really concerning one now is Jimmy Johnson. Yes, he finished 12th.
Is it concerning, though?
It's if you look back at some of the, I know he had 3 wins last year, but if you looked to overall what he did last year,
look at the second half of that season,
it's carried over into the 2018 season. He wrecks 3 cars at Daytona. Granted, it's Daytona, and that's what he likes to do there if he doesn't win. But then he goes to Atlanta, struggles there. He goes to Las Vegas, struggles there. But the whole Hendrick team, and this is where the concern might not be on Jimmy Johnson, it might be on this whole Hendrick team, is we haven't seen a whole lot of speed out of Chase Elliott. Alex Bowman's been right around a 15th to 20th place car, and William Byron is nowhere to be seen right now.
Yeah, Alex Bowman's been the best Hendrick car out there, and like you said, he's been a 15th to 20th place car. Quick look at Jimmy Johnson's last 9 starts. This is the last 6 of last year and the first 3 of this year. At Charlotte, we'll go back before he finished 7th at Charlotte. Since then, 24th, 11th, 12th, 27th, 39th, 27th. And then this year, he finished this year at Daytona, like you said, he crashed out, finished 38th, 27th, 12th. So I don't know if I think it's too early to panic with a guy like Jimmy Johnson. This is like the Jimmy Johnson panic talk is almost kind of like anytime someone says, well, LeBron James is losing it or Tom Brady is losing it. It's like you're doubting one of the greatest of all time, and I don't care what people say, he's up there on that list. Normally about the time you say that is when he goes and he peels off a couple of dominant performances. I don't know when that happens, but I will go ahead and go on the record. I will be shocked if Jimmy Johnson does not have a win by July.
I would agree, but like I said before, I think the concern maybe doesn't lie with Jimmy himself. It lies with that whole Hendrick organization, and it might be we haven't seen a whole lot of speed out of any Chevrolets this year. Kyle Larson did have some speed at Las Vegas, but it is Kyle Larson on a 1.5 miles where you can run the top side.
And I mean, Austin Dillon won Daytona, but again, it's Daytona.
So it might be a little bit of some issues figuring out that new Camaro body with the Hendrick and the rest of the Chevrolets. So give him a couple more weeks and we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But just maybe a little bit of concern, maybe not with Jimmy Johnson, but with the Hendrick organization itself.
Yeah, I think that'd be the way to approach it, because when you look at Jimmy Johnson, he either starts out really, really hot in a season or he struggles. And then there'll probably be that midsummer stretch, definitely when they get to tracks like Charlotte and Dover and Pocono and Michigan that he runs really, really well at. Then he might not win, 3 or 4 races, but he's going to be more consistent and kind of get back to that mid-season form. And the beauty of the way things are in NASCAR is, he's just got to win 1 race, and then you're almost maybe not this year, but most years you're almost a lock for the playoffs if you win 1 race. 2 races, you're definitely a lock.
Well, with the way Kevin Harvick's running right now, I think that whole prediction we had where we might see more than 16 winners is it's already looking like that bullish prediction we made at the start of the season might not work out.
Yeah, but if you're Jimmy Johnson, you're fortunate enough that you get to go to, he runs well at Phoenix, not great, but well. And then he's ran well at Bristol in the past, Texas in the past, Fontana, Dover. Peel off some really good finishes, get yourself in a situation where you can win, and then work from there. I mean, it's a long season. 5 years ago, Jimmy Johnson, or not 5 years ago, but 10 or 15 years ago, this might have doomed that team because of how far back they have to climb. But the way things are structured now, I think they're just fine. I don't know that it's time to panic yet, but I think it might be getting. If in 3 weeks we're saying the same thing, then yeah, it's time to panic.
And another thing about Kevin Harvick is he's already starting to do what kind of Martin Truex Jr. did last year, which helped propel him to the championship, is he's racking up a lot of those playoff points. And that system where these guys can earn some extra points that give them a little bit of a buffer once they get to those rounds in the playoffs, we're already seeing Kevin Harvick rack up a lot of playoff points. I think he's probably already up to about 13 playoff points.
Is it 5 for winning, and then you get 1 for winning a stage? So I'd have to go back and see if he actually won the stages. But
I think he won one of the stages last week, so I think he's up to 13.
He won both stages in Vegas, so that's 12.
And then a stage in Atlanta, and then the win in Atlanta, so I think that's 13 total playoff points in 3 races.
Yeah, that's because what Martin Truex had last year, like 40-some playoff points going into. Kevin Harvick's got 13, and then Austin Dillon has 5, but nobody else has any others other than winning a stage.
And with that, we saw it with Truex, where basically he had a whole race buffer on a lot of the rest of the field when we would start those three race rounds. So he had basically a race to give up. He had that race where if there was a mechanical failure, if they just missed the setup, he had the ability to have that race where the guys that didn't build up those playoff points didn't have that opportunity, and that's really what we're seeing is Kevin Harvick is going to already go into the playoffs with a lot of playoff points.
Well, it essentially gave him a mulligan. I mean, so like you said, if he didn't run well at Dover or New Hampshire, then as long as he didn't run real bad at the next track in that round, he was just fine. I mean, he was almost a lock to make it into the championship, for which he did, and he ended up winning it. So that'll be interesting to see. Right now, the way he's running is incredible. I wasn't as surprised about Atlanta. And I know you and I talked about this earlier this week. He always runs great at Atlanta. I wasn't surprised whatsoever. And it's Kevin Harvick, so it's tough for me to say I was surprised that he ran so good at Las Vegas. But I was a little surprised because this isn't a track that he normally runs exceptionally well at. And neither one of us, we picked Fords to win, but neither one of us picked Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, and it was a little bit of a surprise, maybe not to see Kevin Harvick win the race, but just to see how much he dominated the race and how really nobody could touch him. I think Kyle Busch said something. There was nothing anybody had for that 4-car, and really that's all there's really to talk about from this week at Vegas on the Cup side. Yeah,
not really a ton. We'll go ahead and real quickly run through the points right now. If the playoffs started today, Kevin Harvick would be a lock to get in, and with 2 wins, that's a lock. I mean, I don't see. Well, obviously it's a lock because there's only 26 races in there, so that's a lock for Kevin Harvick. Joey Logano 2nd, Ryan Blaney 3rd, Martin Truex Jr. 4th, Kyle Busch 5th, Kyle Larson 6th, Brad Keselowski 7th, Denny Hamlin 8th. Paul Menard would be in the playoffs. They started today. He's in 9th. Austin Dillon has a win. He's in 10th. Clint Bowyer, Eric Almirola, Kurt Busch, Ryan Newman, Darrell Wallace Jr., and Chris Buescher would be your playoff 16 right now. I think we'll see that change a lot as the season goes on. You guys are on the outside looking in, they could get in. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Eric Jones, Chase Elliott, Jamie McMurray, Jimmy Johnson.
Daniel Suarez.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think he'll be consistent enough to get up in there. AJ Allmendinger, when we get to he runs well at restrictor plates. He also runs really well at Martinsville and, of course, the road courses. Trevor Bayne runs really well on the restrictor plates, and then don't forget to ever throw in a wild card guy on a restrictor plate like a Michael McDowell or a David Reagan. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, as that's your playoff 16 right now. The Monster Energy Cup Series will be at ISM next week.
ISM, and I think we found that we think it stands for Ingenuity Sun Media.
I don't know. It's Phoenix.
It's Phoenix.
Yeah, I'm going to call it Phoenix. So that's where they'll be next week. We'll go at the end of the show. We'll come back and make our picks and projections for Phoenix. Let's go ahead and jump now. Do you want to talk Xfinity or Truck Series? There's only really one real interesting race on.
Yeah, we'll start with the Xfinity Series. We'll get through that real quick because other than there was a really good battle between Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell, but other than that, another very uneventful race. Kyle Larson pretty much dominated this one as well and took home the victory at Las Vegas in the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, Kyle Larson led 142 laps en route to the Xfinity Series win, picking up the win. It was his 9th of his career in the Xfinity Series. The rest of your top 10, Christopher Bell, Justin Allgaier, Ryan Blaney, Elliott Sadler, Daniel Hemrick, Brandon Jones, Tyler Reddick, Cole Custer, and Spencer Gallagher. Kyle Busch, the guy that I almost picked him to win. I was really on the fence with him winning.
I did pick him to win.
Yeah, and he finished 14th. Did the most impressive part of me, or I guess not impressive but surprising, he didn't lead any laps either.
Yeah, Kyle Busch was non-existent. I don't remember the last time we saw a race run this poorly by that 18 team when Kyle Busch is in that race car. We've seen races where he'll be up front, make a mistake, or there'll be some where he doesn't finish well. But he's always a factor anytime he gets in an Xfinity car. And this week, you saw him on camera maybe once or twice because it's like, where's Kyle Busch? And that's the only reason the camera ever went on him. Other than that, the car was bad. Just not a good weekend for that 18 team.
And that's tough for him, too, because this is his home track. I mean, this is a track that he is the most familiar with. It's one of his favorites. And he made a turd in the Xfinity race.
Well, especially when he's on the record said he wants to get to 100 Xfinity wins and then be done.
Yeah.
When you only are allowed 7 races a year in the Xfinity Series now, or whatever it is, I think it's 7.
7, yeah. Is it 5 for trucks?
5 for trucks, 7
and
for
he's already
Xfinity.
ran 3 truck races. Do you run all 3? He's already in 2.
And when you only have 7 races, you're trying to get to a certain mark, and you lay an egg like he does at Las Vegas. You just lost one of your opportunities for the season.
Yeah.
It's not like you can come back and say, you know what, we're going to throw this one on the schedule because we ran so bad at Las Vegas. He's only got 6 more during the season to pick up wins.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. When you look at the Xfinity Series playoffs right now, Tyler Reddick would be in with a win. He's the only eligible guy with a win. They take the top 12 for the playoffs in the Xfinity Series, and right now it would be Tyler Reddick, Elliott Sadler, Christopher Bell, Justin Allgaier, Spencer Gallagher, Ryan Reed, Brandon Jones, Ryan Truex, Daniel Hemrick, Matt Tifft, Kaz Gralla, and Ross Chastain. Jacob, when I look at this right now, Spencer Gallagher, he hasn't had any super, super great runs, but he's kind of doing what I think that GMS team would want him to do. He's kind of consistently hanging around the top 10, hanging around the top 15, and staying out of trouble.
Well, and it was a big jump for GMS to go from the trucks to the Xfinity Series. And, in the trucks, they have 4 trucks. In the Xfinity Series, they only have 1 car. So they're still trying to learn on the Xfinity side. So it's good to see him just playing it smart, running, right where that car probably should run. Where last year, Spencer Gallagher was non-existent in the Xfinity Series.
He wasn't ready.
He wasn't. I don't know if I think he wasn't ready. I also think the team and that car wasn't ready yet. This year, they've brought back some better equipment. They've worked hard, and they've got that car right, and top 8 to top 15. And I think we'll continue to see improvement throughout the season from that 23 car.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see him unless it's like a restrictor plate or a wild card race in contention to win a race. But I think he's a guy that'll make the playoffs. Probably has the makings of a guy that'll finish 6th or 7th in the standings. Which looking where they're at last year, and they were talking about moving up to Cup after last year. That's a good adjustment for him.
Yeah, and like you said, they want to move up to the Cup Series. We knew that last year, so I was glad to see that they didn't, because I think that would have been really bad for that whole organization to move up too soon, especially with Spencer Gallagher. Give him another year in the Xfinity Series. Give yourself another year to kind of build up the resources to move to the Cup Series. And then if you, as GMS, if you can have a Truck Series team, an Xfinity Series team, and then work on your Cup team, well, now you have a whole development program where you can really start to build a team that will be a force in 5, 6, 7 years.
Well, I think that's what a lot of people don't comprehend is, you look at Rick Hendrick. When he started out 30 years ago, that was a one-car team. Jack Roush was a one-car team. Joe Gibbs Racing was a one-car team. Roger Penske was a one-car team up until the late 90s with Jeremy Mayfield. And they were able to get those programs where they wanted them and expand from there. Look at even like a JTG Racing. They had the one car, the 47 car forever. And up until 2 years ago, they decided that their program was ready to move up to a 2-car team. It hasn't been the strongest, but it was built over time.
Well, and look at a team like Furniture Row Racing. Yeah. They just won a championship. That was the first year last year that they went up to 2 cars, and then they said this year we don't have the sponsors to keep running that 77 car. It's gone.
Yeah.
And they're back to a 1-car team because they want to do as best as they can. They felt like having a 2-car team, they were going to be pulled too thin. And with Furniture Row Racing, they're probably one of the most impressive 1-car teams there is, because it always helps, especially with all of the computer systems and everything these guys get with the data they get back from on track. Having a 1-car team, it hurts you, but it also, you have to start at a 1-car team. I don't remember the last time someone came into the series and brought, hey, we're gonna run 3 cars to start out with, and it never really working out that well.
Yeah, look at Furniture Row, Front Row. It hasn't really worked for them except on their restrictor plate program. Let's go ahead and let's jump into the Truck Series, and then I know we kind of want to talk about some things. And there was something announced yesterday that when we were talking about a rundown, we didn't even talk about. So I kind of want to get into the Hall of Fame stuff here in a little bit. But as we've said last week, the truck race is normally the best race of the weekend, and I don't really think it was any different this last week.
The truck race was one of the best races I've seen it's up there with one of the best races I've seen, NASCAR races I've seen in a long time. I've obviously seen a lot of really good dirt races over last year and over the years, but the no one ever dominated the race. Early on, there was Stuart Friesen. He was out front. You thought maybe, okay, he's got a really good truck. Kyle Busch was always there. He ends up winning the race. But I thought Brett Moffitt had this race won for the second week in a row. And I think the Truck Series needs to sit down with a couple guys and remind people how to be lapped trucks. Other than that, Brett Moffitt was strong. But, I mean, there were parts of this race where it looked like we were running at Talladega and Daytona, but then you realize we weren't. And it was there were some tense moments, and you got to remember, a lot of these guys they're still 18, 19, 20 years old, and they're out there doing some of this stuff and put on another fantastic show. I still think we might want to shift some stuff around and move the trucks to Sunday, move the Xfinity to Friday, and then the Cup on Saturday, because the trucks put on the best show of the weekend.
Yeah, almost, I would say 75% of the time. In Daytona, I'll throw Daytona out because all the Daytona races are normally exciting, but I think the last 2 weeks, I didn't get to watch the truck race. I did catch some of the highlights and read some of the recaps. That was the most exciting, and then definitely Atlanta was the most exciting. Quick rundown of your top 10. Kyle Busch picked up the win in the Stratosphere 200. That was his, I believe, 50th. Yep, it was his 50th career Truck Series win. So, that's a lot of wins for Kyle Busch. Johnny Sauter finished second, Brett Moffitt third, Grant Empfinger fourth, Stuart Friesen fifth, Dalton Sargent sixth, Ben Rhodes seventh, Cody Coughlin eighth, Justin Fontaine ninth, and Austin Hill 10th. And Jacob, I know we talked about this the other day, but right now the way Brett Moffitt's running, I think he's a championship contender.
I think right now the way you look at he's running, he's might be your championship favorite.
Him or Johnny Sauter.
And that Brett Moffitt was out front, and Kyle Busch is right behind him because no one ever had more than about 6 truck lengths on anyone else throughout the entire race. But Brett Moffitt's out front. Kyle Busch can't do anything with him. A lap car's in the middle of the racetrack. Kyle Busch goes high. Brett Moffitt goes low. Well, the lap car comes down and doors Brett Moffitt. Somehow Moffitt hangs onto the truck. Kyle Busch goes around him.
It's a dirt track experience.
And, well, then later in the race, Moffitt's back in second and is chasing down Kyle Busch. And Norm Benning, he kind of gets in the way, and Moffitt loses all the momentum, falls back to fourth or fifth, and able to come back up to third. But he ended up leading 27 laps, and he looks really strong. That team looks really strong, and I think he's going to be you're going to hear that name a lot the rest of the season. But real quick, in this race, just to show the competitiveness and how no one really had control, Kyle Busch led 55 of the 134 laps, but other than that, Brett Moffitt led 27, Grant Enfinger led 4, Stuart Friesen, he led 31, Dalton Sargent got up front for 3, Justin Fontaine, he stayed out on a pit stop cycle, and he led 2, Noah Gragson, he led 12 laps, won stage 1, finished that race 12th. I mean, the amount of guys that led this race for not only a few laps, but extended periods of time, and just a 134 lap race just shows how kind of insane this race was.
There were 14 lead changes, which is about 1 every 10 laps or so. So, quite a race on Friday night in the Camping World Truck Series. They're off for a couple weeks. I believe they're off until Martinsville. They'll come back in 3 weeks. A quick look at your standings in the Camping World Truck Series. The top 8 make the playoffs. We're still a long way away from there, but I feel like it's important that we at least touch on this. Johnny Sauter is your points leader. He's got a win. Brett Moffitt in second with a win. Grant Empfinger third. Noah Gragson fourth. Ben Rhodes fifth. Stuart Friesen sixth. Spencer Davis seventh. Dalton Sargent eighth. Matt Crafton and Myatt Snyder are tied for ninth. So that's just kind of a look at it right now. And I think right now it's Johnny Sauter, Brett Moffitt, and everybody else. Noah Gragson's shown signs.
And Noah Gragson's shown the speed. Hasn't shown he's been able to finish races. Stuart Friesen, I think that there, I think that's a name that he's a dark horse. He's a guy that continues to get better, and he's sitting 6th in points and finished 5th this week, led some laps. As he gets more experience running at the front of the field, I'm really thinking that truck is going to be one that they're going to have to deal with. And then, as I think right now we're seeing with Thor Sport, they had a last-minute switch over to the Ford. I think we're seeing some issues with that right now. I think they'll get that straightened out, and we'll see Matt Crafton and Ben Rhodes and Enfinger. Those guys have some speed. So I think there's going to be a lot of more trucks than we've normally seen that are going to be able to work their way into trying to get a spot. And then the one name on that list is at Kyle Busch Motorsports is Spencer Davis. I don't think we're going to see him back in a truck for a while, but it is a situation where at Kyle Busch Motorsports, you kind of got to go, well, do we try to figure out how to get him a full season because he's run decent so far. I don't think that's going to happen, but I think Spencer Davis, unfortunately for him, has started off the season with some good runs and put himself in that early playoff position, but will fall out because he doesn't have a ride for several weeks.
Yeah, he's had a good first 3 starts in the Camping World Truck Series, a 7th, a 13th, and a 13th, which that 7th came at Daytona. So, yeah, that's a look at your Camping World Truck Series. Like I said, they will be in Martinsville here in a couple weeks. That'll be their next race. That is scheduled for March 24th, and they have another 6-week layoff. And I hate how they do that with the Truck Series.
Yeah, the Truck Series is really heavy from about July on, but with the switch in the schedule, we got that extra truck race at Vegas this year, where normally it goes Daytona, Atlanta, and then we don't see anything until Martinsville,
and then you don't see anything until Dover, and yeah, I don't like it.
Yeah, so it especially when the truck races are again one of the most exciting races of the weekend. We have to really wait until June, July for their season to really get where they're running 3 times at least a month.
Yeah, if it keeps up the excitement to this level, I tell you what, I might have to make a trip to Iowa Speedway on June 16th and catch the Truck Series race up there. That's always a fun place to watch a race at, but I've never seen a Truck Series race there. Let's jump on now. I know there were a couple other topics you wanted to talk about, and there's one I want to talk about as well.
Yeah, so just a couple little things is social media this week. Some pictures showed up of Kevin Harvick's rear windshield buckling under speed. I know Chase Elliott and his crew chief were talking about it on the racetrack. To me, that's just nothing more than a brace broke on the back of that windshield. As a race car driver myself, that stuff happens, and when stuff breaks and you're going 200 miles an hour, you're going to see some flex in a windshield if a brace broke. We'll see if anything comes out of it. And Brad Keselowski said this, I think, on NASCAR Race Hub, is he doesn't expect a penalty. And honestly, I don't know what a rear windshield buckling is going to do to help, because these cars are built aerodynamically to work how they're on the racetrack, and anytime anything happens to them, it really isn't going to be of benefit. It's going to be of detriment, and I just don't see how little,
because it could have been something as simple of a bracket or a brace, like you alluded to, a brace busting and causing that. And I think Dale Jr. had that on Twitter as well too. So that'll be interesting to see what comes of it. I don't expect there to be anything either. I don't know what you can do about that. That wasn't why he whooped the field on Sunday. I don't know. They're putting in hard work, and sometimes stuff, we're driving at 200 miles an hour. Stuff's going to break. And then also this week this is kind of a interesting short little story, is Matt DiBenedetto, who drives for Go Fast Racing, had a good run this last weekend for his team. I think they finished 22nd. He got on social media last minute and spoke to all of his fans, saying they did not have a sponsor for this weekend at Phoenix, and it was going to be difficult for them to get to the racetrack. And asked for people if they had any connections or anything to let them know and see if they could get a sponsor. Well, Denny Hamlin stepped up and is offered to pay $5,000 to help them get to the racetrack. Darrell Waltrip did the same thing, and then Kevin Harvick as well all pitched in $5,000 apiece to help that team Go Fast Racing. And Matt DiBenedetto, who I've for a long time really wished to see Matt DiBenedetto in a top quality ride. Didn't he run an Xfinity race or two for Joe Gibbs? Isn't that where he got his start? I mean, I'm thinking way back, like 2010, 2011. I believe he ran at Iowa and Memphis for Joe Gibbs, if I remember correctly.
I think so, and I think he did decent in those races, but he's someone that he outperforms where that car should be.
Yeah.
That car should not finish 22nd, and he knows it, and I think everyone knows it. And the problem is, in this sport, you got to have sponsors, and when you struggle to get sponsors, it's hard to find yourself in a top-level ride.
Yeah, to me, the coolest part about this is you look at Denny Hamlin and Kevin Harvick. Here's two guys that are going to be competing against him on Sunday. I mean, so they don't have to do this. I mean, nobody has to do it, but to those two guys, they would rather, spend the $5,000 and help out and get another car to the track, and that benefits the sport. That's pretty damn cool to me. And there's a lot of people, I know we had this conversation last week about Denny Hamlin being one of the most hated guys in NASCAR all of a sudden, and obviously actions like this show that it's not by his intention.
Yeah, and he was the first one that did this, and when he did it, he basically said this is a guy that deserves to be at the racetrack. It shouldn't be someone that finds themselves in a situation where they can't make it to the racetrack. And this is where this West Coast swing really hurts some of these smaller teams. Is if you look at teams like Joe Gibbs Racing, well, they're sending haulers from Charlotte to meet haulers at Vegas, switch out cars, and then the haulers at Vegas go straight to Phoenix, and then they
and if you're a team like Gibbs and Penske and Hendrick, you can do that.
But if you're a team like Go Fast Racing, you got to take your car from Vegas, drive all the way back to Charlotte, where I only imagine is probably where they're located. I'm not for sure.
Somewhere, I think are they the ones owned by Frankie Stoddard, I believe? I believe they're...
But they've got to go back to their shop, grab either put the maintenance on their car that they had at Las Vegas, which I assume they have a different car they're bringing to Phoenix, and grab their other car for Phoenix, put that in their hauler, and then get to Phoenix. So they're going back and forth where all these other teams have these logistics where they can shorten everything up and make everything a little bit easier. And it just this West Coast swing makes it a little bit harder on the smaller teams.
Yeah, I cannot find where Go Fast Racing's headquarters. I'm with you. I would assume that it's North Carolina, but I cannot find anything on their team website or anything about where they are from. So, I believe they are owned by Frank Stoddard, a long time NASCAR crew chief. He was Ward Burton's crew chief for a long time, and that's just a really cool story to me. I found that when you mentioned that to me before we went on, I found that as really, really cool, and that's awesome to see, and hopefully they can get the sponsorship locked up for the rest of the season, and we can see Matt DiBenedetto out there. Because I'm with you. I think he's a guy I'd love to see what he could do, and even like a Stuart Haas car or a Furniture Row car. I mean, because he's had some really, really good runs in the past. Do you think back, was it last year or 2 years ago that he finished 6th at Bristol? He wasn't with Go Fast at the time. He was with BK Racing, I believe. And it was a really good run he had.
Yeah, that 6th, that was fun to watch. I remember that race because no one really cared about what was happening up front. The camera was locked on to DiBenedetto in that 6th place position, and then his post-race interview afterward, after getting a 6th place finish, was you don't see guys that emotional and that excited to finish 6th very often, and to see that was really cool.
Yeah, you could go ask Kyle Busch how he felt about finishing 2nd, and it wouldn't be nearly as happy as what Matt DiBenedetto felt like finishing 6th. So, yeah, cool story there, and hopefully we can see Matt DiBenedetto at the track more often and have some success down the road. I kind of want to jump into, I can't believe I totally forgot about this, because I'm a huge Hall of Fame guy. I don't know what it is about Hall of Fames, but I enjoy them. And the NASCAR just announced their 20 nominees for induction into the NASCAR Hall of Fame. You just kind of want to run through these maybe. And Davey Allison, Buddy Baker, Red Farmer, Ray Fox, Harry Gant, Joe Gibbs, Jeff Gordon, John Holman, Harry Hyde, Alan Kulwicki, Bobby Labonte, Herschel McGriff, Ralph Moody, Roger Penske, Larry Phillips, Jack Roush, Ricky Rudd, Kirk Shelmerdine, Mike Stefanik, and Waddell Wilson. Any of those names really, really pop out to you? Like, what the hell are they doing on this list?
A couple of them, but I mean, all these guys, some of them, honestly, I've never heard of them before, and that's just because they're with NASCAR. It's not just the Cup Series. You got guys on here like Larry Phillips, who he's on here because of what he did in the NASCAR Weekly Series
at I-70, I believe.
I-70, and then Lebanon I-44 Speedway in Lebanon, Missouri. As well as some other tracks around Missouri before Missouri lost all of its asphalt stuff. And he also ran some dirt, I think, as well. But you got guys on there that aren't necessarily, they didn't do great things in the Cup Series, but they did great things on the other national series, or even, we've seen some guys, his name's escaping, but get in because of modified racing.
Richie Evans. So we look at Mike Stefanik. I mean, that's, I believe he's from, I want to say New Hampshire. Or is he the West Coast guy? I'm trying to remember if I've got... He runs the way of the Modified Tour. I mean, he's sporadically ran in the Busch Series and in the Craftsman Truck Series, or it was Craftsman at the time now, it's Campbell. But he is not on the Hall of Fame ballot because of what he did in the Xfinity or Truck Series. He's in there for what he did on the modified level. And, I mean, won 9 championships on the modified level, and that's the beauty of the NASCAR Hall of Fame is you've seen guys like Ron Hornaday. I mean, Ron Hornaday had a little bit of success in the Xfinity Series, had no success in the Cup Series, but I mean, basically is the face of the Truck Series for a long time. and he got in.
And that's probably going to set the precedent for a guy like Matt Crafton to probably find his way into the NASCAR Hall of Fame at some point. But that's the cool thing about NASCAR is it's not just the guys at the top level that do stuff. And another thing is we've got owners on here, we've got crew chiefs on here, you've got engine builders on here, and then of course you've got drivers on here as well. So it's a whole group of guys that are on here, and it really, when you look at this list, you can't really choose 5 guys that are going to get in this year.
The one guy on this list that just really intrigues me, I don't know that he gets in, but it's Kirk Shelmerdine. Because if you don't know the story with Kirk Shelmerdine, it's kind of a cool story, at least I think it is. He was Dale Earnhardt's crew chief for 4 of Earnhardt's titles. And then about 1992, 1993, he decided, you know what, I want to try this racing thing. I've sat in the pit box forever. I want to give it a try. So he ran the ARCA Series, kind of sporadically ran some Cup Series races, and I remember him in the mid-2000s around the 27 car. It was an unsponsored car. That was back when you actually had full fields of cars and you had to race to get in, and he was never a competitor or anything, but that's how I grew to know the name Kirk Shelmerdine. And then after reading, being a historian of the sport, finding out that, wow, the Kirk Shelmerdine that was the crew chief for Dale Earnhardt's championship teams in the late 80s, early 90s is the same Kirk Shelmerdine. I think that's kind of interesting, and he's on the ballot for what he did with Earnhardt. I mean, he's not on there for what he did in the couple seasons that he ran in the Cup Series, but just kind of a cool story there, I thought. Yeah,
so looking at this list, if you had to choose 5 guys, who do you think gets in?
I'm going to write a blog about this at some point later on, but obviously Jeff Gordon.
That was the one that I think.
That's a lock, and then from there, last year when I did my blog on it, because last year's Hall of Fame class was, I'm trying to think, it was Ken Squire and Ron Hornaday, Ray Evernham, Red Byron, and Robert Yates. And I think I nailed 3 of the 5. Let me go back and try to find that. I know I had Ray Evernham just because of what he did. I mean, how he kind of evolutionized the modern day pit crew. But last year on my ballot, I had Alan Kulwicki. I've always been a huge Alan Kulwicki guy. I had Buddy Baker, Ray Evernham, Robert Yates, and Ricky Rhodes. So I went 2 for 5. I don't know, this year, you throw in a guy like Jeff Gordon. Obviously he's got to be a lock to get in if there ever is one. But outside of that, man, it's tough to really say for sure. You look at a guy like Bobby Labonte. I mean, is he a Hall of Fame guy? There's people that argue that Dale Jr. is a Hall of Famer. And you look at Bobby Labonte, in peak Bobby Labonte from 1997 to 2001 was one of the top 3, top 5 cars in NASCAR.
Yeah, and that's where I think this year it gets really interesting because you've got a good group of drivers. You've got Davey Allison on this list. You've got Buddy Baker on this list. You've also got Red Farmer on this list. You've got a bunch of drivers where they're not going to go, okay, we're going to put 5 drivers in. I think one of the owners, I think Roger Penske, Jack Roush,
Joe Gibbs.
I think one of those will get in, but only one of them. And the other 2 will have to wait. And I just think a guy like Bobby Labonte, I think he might get in at some point. I just don't think it's this year.
You think a guy like Ricky Rudd, I mean, he was just so consistent for so long. You got to think eventually he'll get in. I mean, Terry Labonte was the same way, and he got in the Hall of Fame. So you look at the next couple of Hall of Fame classes for NASCAR, they're pretty heavy. You got Jeff Gordon this year, and the next year you'll have Tony Stewart and Carl Edwards eligible. Now, whether or not Carl Edwards is a Hall of Famer, that's up for debate.
And that's where I think this year, looking at some of the drivers that are on this list, and you look at the numbers that they have, Davey Allison, 19 wins, Buddy Baker, 19 wins, and Ricky Rudd, 23 wins. If these guys get in, well, then you look at guys that they're going to start becoming eligible, like Carl Edwards, and we look at guys now like Denny Hamlin, Kyle Busch, these guys that, okay, well, they really haven't. You look at them now, and I don't think of Denny Hamlin as a Hall of Fame driver.
I think he's borderline.
But you look at his stats, and if you look at the guys that have gotten in, you got to go, well, he is.
I think with that, though, too, you got to look at the times. I mean, you got like Davey Allison. Davey Allison's kind of, in Alan Kulwicki, I think only had 5 wins, but those are the outliers because, their lives were tragically cut short. If those 2 would have been with us even 10 years longer, I think they'd have double the win. I know Alan Kulwicki would have double the wins he does, and Davey Allison probably would. So those are tricky, but with Buddy Baker's a guy too that I think only ran like 4 full-time seasons, because that was back in the day when a lot of guys didn't run the whole season. So it brings up an interesting point, though, down the road when you're talking about guys that, I think Matt Kent's the Hall of Famer, I would say, but then what about a guy like a Denny Hamlin? I'm on the fence with him. A guy like a Brad Keselowski. I say if Dale Earnhardt Jr. is a Hall of Famer, then so is Brad Keselowski. Carl Edwards, Joey Logano. Man, he's still got 10 years left that he could keep winning.
And we've got all these young drivers now too that they're gonna put up the numbers that are gonna make them Hall of Fame worthy drivers. But at some point we're gonna have to go, okay, are these guys really Hall of Fame drivers? Another guy on this list I don't think we've talked about yet is Harry Gant.
Yeah,
and that's just
Handsome
another one.
Harry.
That's just another one that it's a loaded driver class that they've got to go up against a lot of good owners, a lot of good engine builders. So it'll be interesting to see how the voting works itself out. Yeah,
that'll be interesting. I believe they announced that, I want to say April or May. And then they do the induction ceremony in January. But I don't remember when they announced. I know it's sometime in midsummer or early summer. And they'll announce, they do 5. And I like how the NASCAR Hall of Fame does it, where it's the top 5 vote getters no matter what, whereas baseball is stupid and they do, you got to have this much percentage. You can vote for up to 10 people, but only like 3 people ever get in. NASCAR, nope, they just say 5. Pretty easy way to do it. So, like I said, I'll have my ballot out at some point later. I don't actually have a vote, so my fake ballot, but my would-be ballot's out some point later on in the summer. So let's jump in right now. I know you kind of wanted to talk about the Indycars. They're going to begin their season this weekend. They are in St. Petersburg. Just kind of what are you seeing from the IndyCar Series this year?
A lot of fun. And the IndyCar Series has been that way the last several years. It's the competitiveness of the IndyCar Series. It honestly is, I right now have more fun watching the IndyCar Series, as much as it pains me to say this, than NASCAR. The IndyCar Series is fantastic to watch right now. They're on an upswing in terms of teams. They've got 24 cars entered for St. Pete this weekend, and we're going to probably go through this at some point, but if you're an IndyCar fan and you haven't been paying attention to the offseason, this is the point where you should probably pull out of a notebook and a pen and write down where everyone is moved to, because there's only about 3 people that stayed in the same place they were last year.
I hadn't paid a ton of attention to it until earlier, and you brought it up to me, and just looking, I'm like, man, I was a lot further behind than I thought I was. Tony Kanaan's out at Chip Ganassi. He's now at AJ Foyt Racing. Chip Ganassi had 4 cars. Now they're down to 2. Am I right?
It's down to 2. It's the Iceman Scott Dixon, and then Ed Jones moves into that 10 car.
Did not see that one coming. So they don't have Max Chilton or Charlie Kimball anymore.
Both of those guys is Carlin Racing, which was an Indy Lights team, moved up to the IndyCar Series, and they will have both Charlie Kimball and Max Chilton driving for them this season. At AJ Foyt, Carlos Munoz, and Connor Daly are both out from there, and then it's Tony Kanaan, and then Matthias Leist hops into that second AJ Foyt ride. We are seeing Harding Racing with the 88 and Gabby Chavez. They're full-time this season. We're also seeing, I think it's Michael Shank Racing with Jack Harvey. They're going to bring that car out for about part-time, 6 races. 6 races. And then Juncos Racing. I don't know how much we'll see them this year, but they've got a couple cars, and we'll see them a little bit.
I'm going solely off Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is right on everything. They have them down for, I believe, 8 races. Renee Binder from Austria is going to run 4 of them, and then Kyle Kaiser, he's an American, is also going to run 4 of them. And I look around, at these teams. And some of the changes, like you said, a lot of changes. Connor Daly is out at AJ Foyt Enterprises. He is going to run the Indy 500 with Dale Coyne Racing. They're going to team with Tom Burns Racing to run that. Just a lot of changes. Andretti Autosport, Carlos Munoz had ran there for a while. Then he went to AJ Foyt Enterprises. Now he's back there. He's going to run the Indy 500. They actually have 4 full-time teams, and they have 2 teams that are going to run just the Indy 500. Carlos Munoz and Stefan Wilson, their full-time teams, rookie Zach Veach, Alexander Rossi, Ryan Hunter-Ray, and Marco Andretti. So that's a pretty solid team. Other people running full-time, Sebastian Bourdais with Dale Coyne Racing. Spencer Peugeot with Ed Carpenter Racing. Piggott? Is it Piggott?
It's
You would think
Piggott.
you would think it's Peugeot.
I said that for so long, and then it is Piggott.
Well, thank you.
And then also at Ed Carpenter Racing, Jordan King will be in the 20 car. And then also at Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing, that's always been a one-car team with Graham Rahal. Well, they're now a two-car team, and they bring, I believe, Takuma Sato into that second car. So Sato
Was he at Andretti last year?
leaves Andretti.
Yep.
Mikhail Aloshin is out at...
Was he at Schmidt-Peterson?
Yeah, he was at Schmidt-Peterson. Robert Wickens steps into that ride. That car number is going to change from the 7 to the 6. So again, like I said, the amount of changes in the just keep up with everything as much as you can possibly at St. Pete, because, like I said, we've got Joseph Newgarden, who's now in the 1 car because he won the championship, so that's a little bit of a change. But the only guys that really have stayed the same are James Tinchcliffe in the 5, Scott Dixon in the 9, Will Power in the 12, Graham Rahal in the 15, Sebastian Bourdais in the 18, and then Simon Pagenaud in the 22. Yeah. Everything else has changed.
Wasn't Ryan Hunter-Reay in the 28?
And Ryan Hunter-Reay's in the 28, but even at Andretti, even though both Alexander Rossi and Marco Andretti, they're both still there. Well, they switched numbers. As Alexander Rossi moves into the 27, Marco moves to the 98. So even when guys stay with the same team, we're still messing with stuff and switching numbers.
And the big news for me this offseason, or the most appalling thing, is, Elio Castroneves not going to run a full season this year, and that's just weird. I'm sure you can relate to. I don't, other than the couple of weeks that he was out for the whole tax evasion thing, I don't remember a time where Elio Castroneves wasn't one of the faces of the IndyCar series. It's just weird.
And that's one thing that was interesting about this offseason is last year there was only about 20, 21, 22 cars that would enter each weekend. Well, we lose 2 Chip Ganassi cars full-time, we lose a Penske car full-time, and yet 24 cars are going to show up to St. Pete. So this looks really good for the Indianapolis 500, and that's always something that from the minute the IndyCar season ends from last season, I immediately looked to, okay, what's the count at the Indy 500? That's one thing I love to watch is, okay, how are we getting 33 cars at Indy? Can we get 34, 35 and have a true bump day again? And I think this year we might be able to get there.
What did they have last year?
33. They had to... conspiracy theory, I think they had to help... what's his name? It's always Buddy Lazier. They had to help him make sure he could get on the racetrack to make sure 33 cars started that race. But today, being Wednesday, whenever this podcast comes out, but the big news in IndyCar is Danica Patrick finally finalizes her ride for the Danica Double. So she will be at the Indianapolis 500 driving the number 13 car for Ed Carpenter Racing. That one surprised me a little bit, and we were talking about this. I initially had the thought that she might end up driving a third car for Chip Ganassi Racing because they dropped down to 2 cars. That fell apart. So my next thought is Dreyer Reinbold Racing, who shows up at the Indy 500 with Sage Karam. They have said they wanted to run a second car at the Indianapolis 500. I thought that's where she was going to end up. But no, she will be in an Ed Carpenter Racing car, a third car for that team at the Indianapolis 500.
Well, and I believe that Dreyer Reinbold, was that the one we were talking about beforehand, that her brother-in-law was the manager of too? So that would have made sense, but instead she ends up at Ed Carpenter Racing for the Indy 500. And Jacob, when you look at the season, the IndyCar series is interesting in that you run the ovals and you run the road courses. You run a lot more road courses than they do ovals, but I do believe they have 5 oval races on the schedule. I know Iowa, Pocono, Indy, obviously. Let me pull it up here real quick.
Phoenix Gateway.
I count. Okay, so we got Phoenix, Indy, Texas, Iowa, Pocono, Gateway. So they got 6 ovals, and then you got Streets of St. Petersburg, Streets of Long Beach, Barber Motorsports Park in Alabama. The road course at Indy, Detroit, Road America, Toronto, Mid-Ohio, Portland this year as well, and then Sonoma. So I believe I count 10 road courses. So 10 road courses, 6 ovals. A nice mix there. Last year, Joseph Newgarden, won the championship. I believe 2 years ago it was Simon Pagenaud.
2 years ago it was Simon Pagenaud, yes.
So surely one of those two guys are the favorites, right? Or is it Scott Dixon's year again for like the 5th time?
I think Scott Dixon, he's going to be there. You can never count out Will Power in the championship. I think Graham Rahal, I think he's going to be someone that can contend for the championship along with Alexander Rossi. I think those are really your guys that are going to run for the championship. But this is the way IndyCar has been. is those are gonna be the guys that separate themselves for the championship. But then you got guys like Ryan Hunter-Reay. Maybe he can fight for a championship. But the big thing is each week any one of these guys can fight for a win.
Oh yeah,
and that's where the
that's the unique thing about the IndyCars. You get a guy like on a good track like Sebastian Bourdais, who's not a championship contender probably, but on the right track can go out there and win the race.
Well, and even Sebastian Bourdais, the first 4 or 5 races last year was your points leader, and he was still in a good position before that horrific crash he had at Indy in qualifying. Was still in a good position championship wise. He just caught a couple bad breaks. So the way the IndyCar series works, and because it's so competitive, you can have a bad race and it really hurt you. So it's fun that IndyCar's back, and we'll get to watch a good race this weekend.
Yeah, they will be in the streets of St. Petersburg. That is on Sunday afternoon. Do you know the start time on that? It's hard to. IndyCar has a lot of pre-race normally with their broadcast, so I think it's on air at 11:30 Central Time on ABC. But I don't believe the green flag probably is maybe until later. It looks like it actually might be at 11:40 is when the green flag will drop for the IndyCar Series season. So maybe not as much pre-race as normal, but on air, I do know they go on air on ABC at 11:30 on Sunday. You can listen to my favorite, I love Alan Bestwick. So it's a good week. IndyCar, the Cup Series in Phoenix. You'll have the NCAA Tournament Selection Show. A good day of sports on Sunday. Let's go ahead now and wrap things up with our picks for this week. We'll just jump right into the Xfinity Series race at ISM.
Phoenix, let's just say Phoenix.
Yeah, we'll just say Phoenix. I think after this, we won't have to say this again for a long time. But they're in Phoenix for the DC Solar 200. I believe I read there's 40 cars on the entry list. The Xfinity Series is bringing in more cars than the Cup Series is. Last week, Jacob, we both got our Truck Series pick right by picking Kyle Busch. That was probably pretty predictable. But we both whiffed on our Xfinity Series picks. I almost went with Kyle Larson. Instead, I trusted the Fords and went with Ryan Blaney. You took Kyle Busch. No luck on either one of those. I'll let you go ahead and pick first this week. Who are you picking?
I'm gonna go not necessarily with a Cup driver this weekend. I think Jamie McMurray, Kyle Busch is going to be in the 18, so it's going to be really hard to pick against him. And Brad Keselowski's in the 22, but I'm going to pick Daniel Hemrick to win at Phoenix this weekend. He has been someone that's just always inside the top 10, and it's about time he gets into victory lane. So I'm going to take a little bit of a risk, and it's a little bit more of a short track, a little bit more of Daniel Hemrick's background. And I think Daniel Hemrick finally finds a way into victory lane in that 21 car.
I'm going to go with the guy that I think's been the fastest non-Cup Series guy, and that's Christopher Bell. I think it's just a matter of when he gets up that way. He has a win, obviously, already last year at Kansas, but I think it's just a matter of when he gets that win this year. And I think Phoenix is a track that kind of the same to Daniel Hemrick. I think it kind of fits his style. He's a short track guy, a dirt track guy. Phoenix is a 1 mile track that acts like it's a short track, so I'm going to take Christopher Bell to get the win.
Yeah, neither of us picked Kyle Busch, and he's going to drive angry.
He's going to win 100. He's going to lead 195 of the 200
That's
laps.
the only concern I have for this race is Kyle Busch is going to be mad at Phoenix.
Yeah, well, that could be bad, too, for Kyle Busch. So now we'll jump into the Cup race at Phoenix, the Ticket Guardian 500. Kevin Harvick is pretty much, he's owned this season, but he's also owned this track for the most part over the past couple of years. He's ran exceptionally well at Phoenix. When you look at Kevin Harvick's career stats at Phoenix, I know he's got, I believe, 8 wins in just 30 starts. Does he pick up win number 9 and 3 in a row this weekend?
It's a tough question. I want to say no, and I'm going to say no, but not very confidently. I think this is a weekend. It's a short track. It's where aero doesn't mean the aero still means something, but it doesn't mean as much, so I don't think you're going to see as much advantage from the Fords. I think Chase Elliott finally gets a win at Phoenix, ISM. Phoenix, and I'm going to go ahead and go with that. Harvick's tough to pick against, but I think winning 3 races in a row in the Cup Series is really difficult. It's been done before, but it's really difficult to do, and I think Kevin Harvick might have a little bit of a hiccup on a pit stop or something, and Chase Elliott will get a good run for Hendrick, maybe get some momentum moving for them, and finally find his way into victory lane in a points-paying race.
So you're going to go with Chase Elliott. I'm going to go with another Chevy. I'm going to go with Kyle Larson. Here's a guy, you look at the last 3 races at Phoenix. 2 years ago, he finished 3rd. Last year in the spring race, he finished 2nd. Probably had the fastest car, just ran out of laps to get to Ryan Newman. And then last year, he had engine troubles, ended up finishing 40th. But I think this is a track that also kind of suits him. You can kind of run just about wherever you want in Phoenix, and those are the tracks that Kyle Larson tends to like. And he hasn't won yet at Phoenix, hasn't really had a ton of success victory-wise at any tracks other than Michigan. And I think he gets the win this weekend, and I think kind of it gives Chevy some momentum going into spring.
Real quick question. How many problems do we see the dogleg cause this weekend?
Probably a couple.
Couple?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I always remember that truck race from last year when they decided to try to go 6 wide through the dogleg, didn't work out. But that's the one thing about Phoenix that makes it really cool is they've got that wide open dogleg. I mean, you can go like 100 feet below where the track is, and it sets up some really interesting situations heading into turn 3.
And you'll see guys go 4 or 5 wide, and none of them will lift. I mean, they're not in the race car to lift. So, yeah, it'll be interesting this weekend. The Cup Series is on Sunday. The Xfinity Series is on Saturday afternoon, right? It's not a night race.
It's the afternoon race.
Yeah. So it'll be a little bit later to start our time because they're a little bit behind us in time zone standards, but real quick, with the picks this week, I took Christopher Bell to win the Xfinity race. Jacob took Daniel Hemrick. And in the Monster Energy Cup Series, he took Chase Elliott, and I am taking Kyle Larson, which means Kevin Harvick is going to once again lead 250 laps and dominate the race.
Why don't we just say leads all 312?
Yeah, well, I mean, because there's going to be pit stops and stuff. It's not going to happen. We could, but I don't think it'll happen. That'll do it for this week's episode of the No Cautions podcast. We'll be back here next week, and then I believe we'll probably be off for a week due to spring break. Makes me kind of sad. As next week we will preview, I believe, is it Bristol on the schedule next?
It's Fontana.
The Fontana
Club.
I forget
the last of that West Coast swing.
I forget about Fontana all the time. It's just an easy track to forget about.
It shouldn't be. That normally produces one of the best races of the year on the top side.
I forget because it's in California. It's out of the way. It has been bad. The last couple of years it's been good. You go back to like mid-2000s, those races were boring.
Yeah, you got guys like Kyle Larson and some of these guys that
Kyle Busch runs really well there.
That figured it out, but I think Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, for some reason Fontana, that's just a place where I think you'll see those guys go at it.
Yeah, and Brad Keselowski as well. That'll do it for this week's episode of the No Caution podcast. Like I said, we'll be back at it next week. This is Jacob Blair and Trevor Mader signing off for the No Cautions podcast.